Welcome, everyone, as you're jumping on. So glad that you're joining us. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Uh, Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Welcome to Intro to Desmos Activity. So glad that you're here. If you could find the chat button and put into the chat, what's your current role and where are you located? Again, what is your current role and where are you located? We'll get started here in just a little bit. So glad that you're joining us. Again, find that chat, put that into where you are located and what your current role is. All right. Fantastic. Yep, I see people joining us here, putting things into the chat. We've got people from all over the place, from Colorado, Oklahoma, Missouri, New Jersey, Virginia, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Boise, Idaho. All right. Someone else from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. All right. Tennessee, Illinois, Michigan, North Carolina, New Jersey, California. Oh, so glad that you're joining us. And again, as you're joining us here, just put in what your current role is and what you are, excuse me, where you're located. So glad that you're here. And we've got all sorts of things, people, teachers. We've got some elementary teachers, high school teachers, case managers. Oh, you are all welcome here today. So glad that you can join us. We'll get started here in just a little bit. What we're going to be doing in just a couple of minutes is actually starting in on an activity with just a couple of welcome slides for you to enter into. And then we'll get going on the rest of the webinar that we have. And again, feel free during the webinar to put stuff into the chat, or there is a Q&A button if you've got some questions. The chat works really well. My name is Scott Miller. So glad to be joining you. I'm located actually just outside of Chicago. I'm a high school math teacher and math department chair, and also a professional learning specialist with Amplify. And so glad that you are joining us here. Joined to help out with the chat is Kathy. Kathy's located in California, Kathy Henderson. And so glad that we are getting started here. So what I'm going to go ahead and begin with what we've got going on here is the following, is I'm going to enter you into an activity that's going to have a couple of slides. We'll just show you what those slides will look like from a student view. It's just telling about how you're feeling, where you are located. So you move a point to then share, and then also your familiarity with Desmos. And whether you are very familiar or not familiar at all, you are welcome here. So I'm going to go ahead and get you started on that. To join our activity, Kathy has put into a link directly to that activity, or you can go to student.desmos.com and type in this 6 code entry of PYR38T. It is not case sensitive. You can go ahead and put that. Yes, this is recorded. You will be sent a recording after our webinar in a day or two. So don't worry about if you miss something or you have to, your internet cuts out or something else like that. Okay. Yep. All right. So again, you can, Kathy's put into the chat directly to the link, or you can go to student.desmos.com. Go ahead and start on those 3 screens there. The first one is just how you're doing right now. Second screen is where you're located. Third one is just what's your experience level with Desmos. And again, whether you have never touched Desmos before or you've experienced it some, you're welcome here today. All right, we've got people from all over the place. Shout out to Jill down in Redbud, Illinois, down in Southern Illinois. Got people from all over. This is great. Newcastle, Indiana. Like we said, a couple of people from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So glad that you are here. New Jersey, West Virginia. Oh, this is fantastic. I'm also interested to see, for us that are here, do we have anybody who's outside of the United States that's here and joining us? All right, fantastic. So just going to give you a couple of minutes to work on that from those three screens that we have there. And then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so as we're going through, I'm just going to take a peek, see where we're at as a class that we have here. So we've got a range of a lot of us feeling pretty good, and some of us, I think, a little tired as we're looking at beautiful day, still on summer break. Myself, I'm actually back at it. I've been back at it for a week with students so far. Tired but well. Oh, I'm sorry that you have a fever. I hope that mitigates soon. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. So again, uh, if you look in the chat, Kathy's put in there a link to our activity. We've got three screens that we're working on here that you're entering into. Got about just about 60 of us in. I know we've got about 90 some people here. So keep clicking on that activity, jump into it. And I'm going to go ahead and look at our agenda here to talk about what we're going to be doing. So again, welcome to Intro to Desmos Activities. We're going to be spending time experiencing Desmos activity as a student first. If you need assistance with something like after our webinar, if you have a question, you're welcome to email us at help@amplify.com. Or if there is some other information that you're looking for, you can find us on X at Desmos Classroom. And so glad that you're taking time to join us. Yes. Yeah. So only three screens that we have so far in the activity. We'll be getting to the rest of it in just a little bit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what we're going to be looking at is I'm going to go ahead and if you could join me back over to the webinar, we'll jump back into the activity here in just a second. What we offer at Desmos Classroom, free classroom activities like the one that you're experiencing here. It's not actually an activity per se, but it's pieces of some activities. We have free activity builder for teachers to edit and create their own activities. We also have a Desmos Math, a 6th through Algebra 1 full year program standard-based lessons that we have and assessments and relationship. That actually is a subscription-based curriculum that we have. All the other things are free and will remain free. So the agenda that we have is you're going to experience parts of a Desmos activity as a student, and then learn about the teacher dashboard, then learn how to find and assign activities, and find resources to continue your learning. And then we'll save about 8 to 10 minutes towards the end for any questions and answers that you have that aren't answered during our webinar time that we have. And I can see that Kathy has put into the chat a link to the participant agenda that has information. We'll refresh and look at that towards the end of the time that we have together today. Also want to be clear about what is not on the agenda. How to use the graph and calculator, which Kathy and I love, but it's not what this particular webinar is about. How to create your own activity, that's a different webinar about building Desmos activities. How to use computation layer, we have another Desmos activity, or excuse me, another webinar on that as an introduction. And then updates of new Desmos features. Those are ones that get passed out sort of through email blasts that we have, and then also where we share those on different social media such as X and other things like that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the activity. If you haven't gotten there, Kathy's put in a direct link to it. If you want to go by opening up a tab and typing in student.desmos.com and entering in PYR38T, you are welcome to do that. We're going to jump into then what that is about. So what we do at Desmos, just want to make sure, is that we believe that all students are brilliant, and our job as teachers is to basically tap into their brilliance and help students learn math. We have the free suite of math software tools We're really into making math enjoyable for students, not just for students, but especially for you as teachers and also. So let's jump into what we're going to be looking at in terms of what we've got in terms of learning together. Okay, so let's look at what we've got so far for us as a group. I'm going to just pause this here for a second or a couple seconds here. So you're going to pause you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And hopefully you're peeking at my screen as you can see here. We've got lots of responses. Here are all the individual responses of that sort of how you're feeling today. This is the overlay. For those of us who have taught for a while, this may remind you of giving out acetates for the overhead projector and having students write on them and then placing them on top of each other to show through. So this is the overlay. And so have all sorts of answers that we have going on here. And glad for those of you who are still on summer break. And then all those of us that have already started back in the classroom too, and maybe a little bit tired with how things are going. Let's look at where we are located. I'm going to do the overlay again here. And we have, oh, fantastic. Thank you. We have someone joining us from Mexico City. Oh, so glad that you are joining us here today. And we tend to be, it looks like here, very East Coast focused with a lot of people, but smatterings of all different places around the country. And so glad for those of you who are joining us, bienvenidos from Mexico. I'm so glad that you're with us. All right, so let's look at our familiarity with Desmos. We have not sure what Desmos is, so glad that you're here. Used only the calculators, used Desmos activities, but not often. And then some I've used activities frequently. I'm so glad. So hopefully we got tips for everybody. So what we're going to do is, like I said, is we're not going to do a full Desmos activity. We're going to do pieces of some Desmos activities. And so the first screen that I'm going to have you try as a student is going to be one it looks like this. And so I want to show you that as from a student perspective. And your task then is to sketch a graph. There are two features. You can use a pencil or you can use a segment tool, but just make a design. And after you do that, then you'll go back and then hit play to show what's happening. Because what you have is drawing a distance versus time graph to represent a turtle's journey across the sand and then hit play. So after you draw something, it will pop up with an action button for you to be able to see what happens. So then go ahead and do that. And if you want to revise the turtle's journey, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pace us to that particular screen and let us go ahead and start on that particular screen. So again, create a distance versus time graph of a turtle and the journey across the sand and then hit play. And you are welcome to modify that, alter that, however you want to. Right. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes or so to experiment with that with different sketches, see what happens. And then I'm going to find a couple of just interesting sketches that I see that's going on here. And again, what we have here is we're going to be looking sort of 3 screens from one particular Desmos activity, and then we're going to look at 3 screens from a different Desmos activity. All right, let's take a peek at where we're at here. Oh, we've got all sorts of wonderful looking journey that our turtle is taking across the sand. Oh, this is fantastic. All right, going to take about another minute. So feel free to sketch, watch, and revise your process of what you created for your graph. All right. And for those of you just joining us, click on the activity link that's in the chat. It's going to take you to a screen where you're sketching a graph of a turtle taking its journey across the sand and then hitting play. And we're going to take a look at a couple of examples here in about 30 seconds. Right. Got about 10 seconds, and I'm going to pause us and have you join me back on my screen so you can see some of the examples that we've come up with as a group. Okay, it's going to pause you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, if you could join me back on my screen so you can see what I have here on the teacher dashboard, just some different examples. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of what happens. So let's look at, say, maybe this one right here. Okay, see what happens in terms of our turtle and what it's play. All right, I don't think my popping up what it's showing. Let me see if I can find one that's going to show the turtle's graph of what it's doing here. Let's take a look at maybe this one here, see if this pops up. Oh, I'm sure you're seeing it on your end. I'm not seeing it on my end quite yet. I think I've just got a little bit of lag time, but it looks like we're starting at one place, going to another. Maybe take a look at someone who's got some uh, directions here. Be interesting to see what happens when we've got things that are crossing over each other from that aspect. So let me see. Let me see if I can refresh my screen, see if that'll help here really quick. I'm just going to reload my page, see if that'll take care of it. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we've got some that are showing. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that for letting me know. Okay, so here's one that we got that has several things where I've got a purple and a blue. Let's see what happens in terms of our turtle. In terms of moving across. Oh, that one's not popping up either. Let me try this one more time. Let's see what happens. See if my turtles pop up here. Nope. Oh, there we go. All right. There we go. Oh, so I have two turtles, now three turtles that are moving on as I have more than one graph, and then where they're going in terms of their location. So I can see then in terms of my blue using, I end up with a blue turtle with that type of thing. So more than one line creates more than one turtle. And here is one in terms of its journey. We're seeing that it's moving along, and then we've got some time that it's taking and then moving along faster and then ending up on the grass. All right, so what we're going to move on to next is just looking at two more screens where you're going to create a story for our turtle with what's going on. So here is Luca's graph. And so with Luca's graph, you're going to look at this. He drew this graph to represent a new turtle. Tell the story of what happens with the turtle and its journey as it's moving across the sand. And then take a look then in the next screen afterward to see what the reveal is in terms of when you hit play. See what happens. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause us and go ahead and add those two screens. So if you want to move over to screen 5, you can. And then move on to screen 6 then after that. So again, tell a story and then look at the reveal of what that has afterward. All right. let's see what we've got in terms of some stories that we're writing here. Oh, fantastic. Wonderful stories that you're coming up with. Then again, once you've come up with your story, go ahead and take a look at screen 6 to see what the reveal is. See if it matches with what you were thinking about with the story that you wrote. All right, I'm going to pause us in about 10 seconds just so we can see a couple of examples. So I'm going to pause us in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you could return back to my screen, I've just grabbed just a few snapshots of just 4 of us as students that are into the activity, just to see what we've written here. So we have the turtle traveled a bit, then took a rest for 2 seconds. After his rest, he traveled on. Tommy Turtle started walking toward the grass after 2 seconds. Tommy only made it 2 feet before he had to rest 2 seconds. Tommy then continued on. The turtle walked onto the sand. A child picked it up and looked at it. Then it was set down and continued on to the grass. It stopped in the grass to lay its eggs. And then we have someone who's giving in something about in terms of the turtle moved at a slow pace with 2 stops for 2 and 4.5 seconds respectively. Okay, so just lots of different ideas and suggestions that we have. And I'll show you later of how do I capture these snapshots from these wonderful responses that we have. Okay, we're going to adjust now to another activity, just in terms of looking at previewing part of it. Purpose of this activity is for a student to understand what is a scaled copy and to describe characteristics of what scaled copies are using some informal language. So what I want you to think about here is first you're going to make a scaled copy. So I'm going to show you what that looks like as a student. Okay, so you can maneuver these points here to make any shape that you want in just a few seconds here after I unpause us. And then you're going to move on to understanding what you think a scaled copy is and what stays the same and what changes. But I want you to think of it as, let's say you're a student sort of experiencing this for the first time. So I don't want to use a lot of math language in terms of vocabulary that you know. I want you to think about it in terms of vocabulary that you would use the first time you experience it, and then move on to screen 9. And then you're going to be looking at in terms of some information about that. So I'm going to pace us to those screens. So the first one that you're going to do is actually going to be screen 7. So I'll just pace us there to see some of the wonderful shapes that you make. So I'll unpause you, go ahead and make an interesting shape. And the name of this particular activity here for screens 7, 8, and 9 is called the scaling machine. The one that we had before was called turtle crossing, but I'll show you how to find those 2 activities later and what we're going to be doing in this webinar. And I'll thank you for that question in the Q&A. We'll actually show you how to access Desmos as a teacher then also in a little bit. Okay, let's take a look at some of these fun. Oh, look at these interesting shapes that we've got going on here. Some symmetrical, some not, some that look like birds, some that are just a geometric shape, some that look like butterflies or a cat or a star of some way, shape, or form. Oh, this is fantastic. All right, great. You made a shape. Just fantastic things that we've come up with. Then what we're going to do now is going to show you in terms of uh, once you get to the next screen of what you've got from a student perspective, is you're going to zoom and print. And so there is a plus and a minus button on the copier for you to look at. So go ahead and do that in terms of there's a plus and minus on that. So I'm going to add screen 8 and screen 9. Go ahead and try those to see what they're like. So as soon as you've made your scaled copy, excuse me, you made your shape, you go to the next particular screen, go ahead and hit the zoom and print to see what happens. And then give just a little description of what do you notice stays the same and what things change. Okay. And then once you finish that, then it will show you some printouts of what you can describe about a scaled copy is. All right, let's see how we're doing as a class here. Great, we're coming up with fantastic ideas of what stays the same. So it looks like what we're coming up with is the overall shape and something about angles between edges. And then what are some things that change? Length, size changes. Colors stay the same. Direction it's pointing stays the same. Oh, fantastic ideas of what we're coming up with. Length of sides, the size of the object. Great. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Okay. And then looking at what we have onto the next screen of things that what is something about something that's a scaled copy. We're coming up with things that say stays the same shape regardless of the size. We have things area changes, but the angles and points stay the same. Oh, just fantastic ideas of what you're coming up. A miniature version of something we had before. Great, fantastic ideas. All right. So that's again, it's just a few screens that are about an activity that is on scaled copies, is what that is. The previous one was on a turtle crossing. What I want to show you then is one more particular activity just to show you. You can come back to it later. So I'm going to pause this here in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And I'm going to go over then to what's called a card sort. And on a card sort, it would be of what you think scaled copies are and what you think are not a scaled copy. And the way that those work is if I think something is a scaled copy, I would place that on top of that particular card and then let go and it's connected. That's how that goes. If I want to enlarge it, I can click on it. If I think I need to maneuver it onto a not a scaled copy, it would go there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and add that screen for you. You can try that. And then in another minute, I'm going to show us then take a peek behind some of the things that I did on the dashboard. And then eventually we get into what if I want to have students experience an activity? How do I find something? How do I have students do that? How do I look at it from the teacher side? right. Okay, let's see how we're doing as a class here. All sorts of people moving things around. And again, need to place the tile on top of something else for them to connect to one another. Okay. And again, we're just going to work on that for about another 30 seconds. Then I'm going to take a peek at the aspect of you've experienced this activity as a student. Now we're going to take a peek at what are some of the features for you as a teacher to work with. Okay, disconnect cards. If you want to peek over at my screen, I can show you that. So here I've got where I've connected it as a scaled copy. And then I just hold my mouse button down on the tile that I want to move, and then I can maneuver it off and then on to a not a scaled copy. So that's how I can disconnect them that way. And it's just fine if you ended up joining the activity twice. That's okay. Just jumps you in where you're at. So I'm going to pause this here in about 15 seconds, and then we're going to transition from looking at this activity as a student to now what are we looking at as a teacher? Okay. So I'm going to pause this here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. If you could join me back over at the webinar. And then I will talk about what we have going on here in terms of the activity. So hopefully you've joined and you can see my screen. The first thing that I did for us as participants in here is I have these different tabs that are up here at the top. And I'm going to focus on what I've got in terms of the summary tab. And that's just sort of a snapshot of everybody that's in the webinar or into the activity, and then sort of what is their completion piece that's going on as we're moving through. And what I did first was I anonymized you. So you might notice that on your screen when you're unpaused that you had a name that was different than your own. That's because I've anonymized you by assigning you randomly just a name of a mathematician that could be from years past or actually a present day mathematician. So if I take off and turn off the anonymize, that has everybody's name that's here. And then when I turn that back on, then I have the mathematician. If I want to know who a particular student is, I can just hover over. So if I just zoom in there, that's Rebecca Dan is Marjorie Lee Brown. Very easy to work with that. Somebody might say, like, what if somebody put something inappropriate on that? So, Rebecca, if I just have your permission, what I would do then is I could hide the student, and that would just move Marjorie down to the end of this. Doesn't mean that Marjorie can't be in the activity, just means that Marjorie's screens wouldn't be showing, and I could go talk to a student or something else like that. So that's the first one, is anonymized. And I find that that's really important. It creates a sense of security for students in terms of what they're putting up, and examples that I can show for students from an anonymous standpoint is really powerful in that sense. So just the anonymize button. The next one that I used was the pacing button. And so someone is asking about what do you do in terms of students who are finishing early? Well, often I have where we have a few screens at once. So in other words, we're sort of looking at an activity and having students get through a couple of the screens at around the same pacing. And then we may have some students who, or a pair of students that may be a little quicker, and they may be getting onto the third screen. So let me show you what I did here. As I turned pacing on, that was this button right here that says paste. And then what it's going to do is I'm going to stop. I'm going to go ahead and select the first three screens, the first screen and the third screen, and restrict them to that. And so that means that places everybody within that set of three screens that we have going on to work through. And then I can turn, the other thing you may have noticed is then I had my pause button. That's what I worked. And so I'm going to just show you in terms of unpause and pause. I can see that on the screen. It changes color for myself to see, but it's a way that I can direct attention for us to working. And hopefully you notice as I gave you a gentle warning for when I'm going to pause, and a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What I did then as we were moving through the activities, then I worked at pacing us to one particular screen. That was one where we created the turtle's journey. And I used another tab to help us with that. And that was the student tab. And the student tab is a great way to show is a student view of what's going on with the activity to show what happens. So in other words, like being able to maneuver something or being able to show something of changing a tool, and then showing in terms of how I can show to hit play. But as you notice, I didn't actually do that because I wanted you to experience that as a student to see what would happen. But again, using the student tab gives me a student view of what the students see. The summary is something I can see where students are at. And then the teacher tab is another one. So I wanted to show you that in terms of when I hit the teacher tab, that shows me everybody's graph and what they created. And then I can look at different particular graphs I want to feature or highlight or something else like that to work with. So again, things that we worked with was the summary. That was just where I showed you the anonymize from that perspective. What I showed you in terms of, so that was here. Okay. The student tab shows us what the student view is on the screen. And then pacing is where we can paste something. Now, what I did with this activity where after we did the turtle, where you showed and created the crossing, then I added 2 more screens to it. And then allowed students then to move on in terms of screens 5 and 6 from what they created. Okay. All right. There's one other particular feature that we have up here, and that is sync to me, and that'll take everybody to that particular screen. So if I wanted everybody to focus here on, say, screen 4, and I hit sync to me, that takes everybody in the activity to that particular screen. So it's similar to a pacing, just paces to one particular screen is what it does. Okay. All right, now going to go back to the summary tab to show you some of the things of how things were answered in our activity. So you may see, well, I see some dots. That means that that's something that students interact with, but it's something that I'm going to have to look at to see what responses were. So those, you can see the first 4 questions that we had there were all things that you created, designed, or chose. Same thing with screen 5. Then you may see on screen 6, we have a dash. That means it's just a screen in terms of where students are reading something or seeing something that's happening. It's not something that they're entering or inputting something at. And then here on the check mark means that the student has completed what the activity is. Or on the card sort, it's one that shows whether the card sort is in the correct order or not. And an X shows that something's not quite correct yet. But again, just what we have. The other one is I might get an error message, and that's where the input that a student has, let's say that it was asking to solve an equation, and the answer was 3, and the student typed in the word 3, then it would show an error message, meaning that the student needed to enter a numeric value. And it'll actually give a warning sign to that student. Okay. All right. A couple other things just to show you before we get into the feature about the teacher side from a teacher.desmos.com and getting into it. And that is where I'm going to look at the aspect of where some ways I collected our answers that we were looking at. So again, just to summarize what we were looking at, we had the summary that shows me the entire class. The teacher tab shows me all of the work that you have done as a student at US students. And then the student tab just shows me the activity as it is from a student perspective to sort of demonstrate something. So I typically, or Kathy and I typically, on pause, will actually demo just a little bit or go a brief overview of the screens that we're going to be working on. before then hitting unpausing and having students work through those. But then in terms of showing features of work that we had, I'm just going to go back to, for example, our first screen that we had here and show you from the teacher side. One of those where it has an overlay that I hit, and that shows me then all of us together as a class, what we're looking at. So that has some importance. But if I go to like the scaling machine that you had and I hit overlay, that's one that's not going to be super helpful in terms of the look from that particular perspective. So that's where looking at the individual responses. Okay. And I can display different responses that students have by clicking on one. Okay. And here I'm showing what Dorothy's looks like. And what's really interesting is I can actually maneuver and show Dorothy's, but it doesn't change what's on Dorothy's screen. And I can scroll up and down to show different examples. So that's one way. Or I could do it from just the teacher dashboard here and then teacher tab and then click on a particular screen. Okay, so that's one way. And that's typically like when I started using Desmos activities, I would do that a lot of clicking on ones that I thought were interesting and explaining something about that to the class. But something that I can do in terms of a change for that is actually where I can show you where you might see there's a little square next to names. And so I can actually select snapshots of different shapes that we've got here. And then I could then present those snapshots. And this is a little more advanced feature to work on, present those. And then I can add a question and then ask which shapes are symmetrical. And then have students discuss that in terms of those. Now, it's limited in terms of what I can display is only 4 at a time, but I can save that to an album and then add more shapes if I wanted to. And so I want to show you where that album is looking at. And you might have seen, okay, hey, there was, Scott mentioned some other tabs. You mentioned summary, teacher, student. That also can live here in snapshot. So I can add in more snapshots if I want to from that particular screen that we have there. So a couple ones is just clicking on it to display, or go ahead and grab some of those particular screens to snapshot. And one more advanced feature, if you've had a little experience using Desmos activities, I can actually send feedback. So I just want to show you this of what I've clicked. And then I could ask the question is your shape symmetrical? Okay. And I'm going to send that. I want to show you what that looks like from the teacher dashboard side, or so the summary side. And that those students then, what it shows in green is that I've sent them feedback. And if one of those students reads that, then it changes to gray. As that means this little triangle changed to a gray. There we go. So that person has looked at their feedback. Now, right now, it's just one-way feedback of where you as the teacher send something to the student, but they could modify something. But it's not a two-way feedback where a student is responding back to the question that I ask. It's just a feature that's there. Okay. All right. So let's take a look then into what we've got of how do we get into an activity and work with it from that perspective. And from the teacher.desmos.com website. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go ahead and sign out of my activity and then show you how I'm going to get into it all together. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go to teacher.desmos.com. I'm going to go to the sign in. So again, we did student.desmos.com. Now we're just in teacher.desmos.com. And if you haven't created an account, you'll need to do so. I have. I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So again, I use my email address. You could use your school email address. If you have a Google email address, you can use that. So I'm just going to sign in and show you what I have pictured here. Okay. All right. So here are some different things that I can look at. So I have some featured collections. And then I have some featured activities to try, and it has sort of a grade level associated. But I'm going to show you just some different things that we can look at from the teacher.desmos.com. So I'm going to say, let's look at linear functions. This is just a collection of activities that we're looking at here. Okay. So here is some different ones that we're looking at. So this one is similar, another turtle in terms of turtle time trials, similar to the turtle crossing. And then we have some other ones that work through some other activities. And let's say I want to peruse one of these activities. So let's say I want to look at what does land the plane look like? Okay. All right. So I click on land the plane. And then it gives me then a mini feature of all of the screens. So this is similar to looking at the student tab from that perspective. And I'm just going to hit land the plane. And then I could see what is it like to experience it sort of as a student. And then look at each of the individual screens and look at, yeah, I like this activity. I think I want to try this with my students in the classroom. You know, I think this is something that is really worthwhile. And I think I want to assign it to my students. So I'm going to show you how to do that and then show you how to use some features then with you as a teacher to help you with running the lesson that you're or working through the lesson or facilitating it. Okay. All right. So let's say I like land the plane, want to use it. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to assign, and so that is here. And that are two features that we have. So one is if you create classes for your students, such as through Google Classroom, or just create them with an entry code for your students to sign up and approve, or I can do a single session code. What I did for our activity that we experienced, I did a single session code, and you can see that it has a code that's active for 2 weeks, a year, or 48 hours. And when I create the invite code, then this is what I'm looking at here. For a student going to student.desmos.com, and there's that 6 character entry, or I can go with the student link, copying that and emailing that to students or putting in our learning management system from that perspective. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's how I can access and create that. And then I can get into the teacher dashboard. So this is just to play around. So I highly recommend find an activity, create a code, class code for it, and then you can play around with pausing, with pacing, and other things like that to work with. Now you might say, wait, I mean, really be nice if there was sort of some guide about an activity that I was going to use to have some information about it. Well, two different ways to access that. One is, so I'll turn the pacing off, is on the activity itself from a student perspective, is each of them has a teacher move to talk about what is sort of recommended to do in the classroom in terms of how to pace this, some questions to ask for students to work with. So for this one, it is pacing to this screen only. So it would be just pasting to that one, and then having students work through that particular screen and then adding the next ones on beyond that. So that's one way of each screen then has teacher moves of what's going on and what student sample responses would be. Now, if you prefer to be someone that likes, I would like it all written out. Well, each activity here has a teacher guide and then has a lot of different pieces of information on it, sort of a checklist, has screenshots with the teacher moves written out. So that's if something that you like from a PDF standpoint for you to use to print out and work with, or to create over something into electronically that you can type on, another way that you can work with it. So either screens within the activity or screens from the activity as summarized from that standpoint there for you to work with. So again, looked at in terms of what we had from a teacher.desmos.com and a student.desmos.com to work with. from that aspect. So I want to open it up then in terms of some other things we can do is we can also do some searching. So to go back to an activity that I want to look at, I'm just going to hit the home button or the Desmos classroom button. Either one of those will do that. And then I can go into a search. So maybe I want to look at something, maybe to see, is there anything about turtle? Okay, there's Turtle Crossing. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. This is that full activity where we just peeked at a few screens about. So that was just actually the first 3 screens of the activity that we looked at that we had here. But someone was asking about that. Where does that come from? And that's in a collection on functions that is there also to work with. Okay. Another one might be in terms of, let's see if I've got scaling. I searched there. See, there's scaling machines. That's the one that we were working on here. Here's the full activity. And again, we just worked on just a few screens on that. So that was actually just 3 screens for that particular activity. All right. One other feature I wanted to show you to get comfortable with. If you are running through an activity and you, let's say, as you're running through it, you find out, hey, there's a couple of screens that I would like to skip over. So in other words, when we want to just assign a couple of screens, we can do that using the pacing feature. So I'm going to go back to show you, okay, so I created that class code for the activity. I'm going to look at dashboard history and just look at the dashboard for land the plane. And if I just wanted, here's a couple of features just to show you. If I just wanted students to only focus on screens 1 through 3, I used pacing and added those screens, and that's all that they would be settled on. But let's say in this activity, I really wanted to do screens 1 through 5, but I want to skip screen 4. I can't do that in terms of linear how it is, but I do have a feature. If I add those 2 screens, this 3 dots that I have here, I can hide that screen. And now it's screens 1, 2, 3, and 5, but it numbers it as 1, 2, 3, and 5. But instead of 5, it screens it as number 4. So just, I can hide some screens. And that's a way to sort of get around the linear piece of like, that's a screen that I want to skip over. Don't need to use, don't feel it's worthwhile right now. So just wanted to show you that in terms of a feature. Okay. All right. Standards linked to activities, not from this general feature of the activities themselves. They typically are associated with a grade level, linear function. Our curriculum, though, is connected to standards and then different versions then for different states that have different standards then also. So our curriculum is, but the activities themselves do not connected to particular standards, but they are connected to grade levels of what they've got. Okay, another one that was asked. Let's see, can I create and assign different activities to various groups of students, small groups, or does it have to be? It's all students, whole group is how it's set up now, unless you would create smaller groups of smaller classes is what you could do. What I mean by that, 2 different features to do it is, I'm just going to hit the classes feature right here. And it would be creating a class, adding a new class. And so if you had different groups, you could do that, or I can integrate then into Google Classroom. But you can where you run single session codes for different groups to work with. That's another possibility. And sort of work with it that way. Let's see. Can students choose to see their slides in translated languages? That is a feature in terms of, I would pose that, Rose, appreciate that question. I would send that question actually back to Desmos, to Amplify to get more information on that. I think that would be more particular to the question. They'd be able to give you more background than what we can answer for you right now on that. I think it'd be helpful. So I'm going to keep answering some questions that you have, or if you want me to illustrate something. But while you're doing that, again, so Rose, appreciate that question. Here's that help at amplify.com if you want to pose that question to them. I think that'd be great. You can revisit it, teacher.desmos.com. You can also join the Desmos Educator group on Desmos. But right now, as you're putting in some more questions, we've got a quick survey to have you answer very quick. This is on the survey on intro to activities. My name is Scott Miller. And the paid platform that was asked about it's the activities here are free. The curriculum has a paid subscription to it, but in terms of the activities that we're using and ones that you're searching or ones that you find through Google searching, those are absolutely free. No, and there's no paid subscription to have a teacher account. We're not going to send you spam email or anything else like that. We may send you some email about some new features, but it's not where you're going to get inundated by things or any type of paywall or anything else like that. Absolutely free. Someone asked about how do you create the activity with multiple slides? Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that. We offer another short webinar or introductory to building is what we did there. So again, my name is Scott Miller. If you could fill out that survey, keep those questions coming. If there's something I went through a little quickly, you'd like to see illustrated again, be happy to do so. Just to sort of talk through sort of the way that Kathy and I started when we started using activities in the classroom is we would look at an activity, find a few screens that we were interested in and paste students to those screens. We'd look at sort of the teacher notes to help us with that and some questions to ask. And then we looked at pausing, anonymizing, and then displaying when we're pausing some different student work to show their brilliance. Later, we got into where we started using snapshots and feedback. So that was something that we used later, not something we did right away from that particular activity. Why do some activities have a try it label? Okay, so let's take a look at that. That's just for you to see. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So I'm going to go back home. We've got here, it's just an activity for you to try to see if it's something that you might be interested in using, just some featured activities. That's it from that perspective. And also it gives you a preview of some activities that are part of the Amplify Desmos math curriculum, but these don't cost anything, something you may want to try in your classroom. It has some resources that are there. Okay. All right. And again, it's just some ways that you can try some things from the Desmos math curriculum, but you can use them in your classroom to assign. But there's lots of different things just to show you some featured collections that's here based on grade level. So again, not by standard that Kathy mentioned, but definitely by grade level. And then also by concept is what we're looking at. So as you can see, lots of different activities that we have for different grade levels. And some sneak peeks into the curriculum. And yes, goes all the way down to some activities from kindergarten that we use. And just to show you for that, of those activities there are not as heavily electronic based to work through. So if I was to show you that in terms of an activity for you to try from matching groups, you can see there's very few screens that are part of the activity, and then also some paper and pencil type things. Webinar that we're looking at for, let's see, teaching building activity. I think it's just intro to activity builder. Is that right? I think that's
I believe it's intro to activity builder. If it's not listed, it will be there soon.
Yes. Thank you.
One other thing, Scott, I wanted to point out that
Yeah.
all the activities that are on the Desmos website have been created by the Desmos team. If you
Yep.
Google something and find another activity, it may be built by someone outside of Desmos. It's more of a teacher created activity, and it hasn't been vetted as much as
Right.
these activities have.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that. So a person asked, do any activities launch from the graphing calculator? No, they don't. So that's a different website in terms of just desmos.com from the calculator site and accessing that way. But there are in the activities, or you can build an activity that has the graphing calculator in the activity to use. All right. So thank you so much. You will get a certificate from the survey that you answered those few questions on, and you'll get a recording of this particular webinar then also. Okay. Someone asked, love the question. I'm just going to actually present this one out. Are the pre-AP College Board Desmos activity Desmos approved? Let's see. So I wouldn't say when you say Desmos approved, I think I would need a little more information on that. Um, I think in terms of uh, pre-AP College Board, they're not ones that they've been created by Desmos Classroom in that sense, but there are people that have created those that are connected, like activities that are part of the College Board curriculum in that sense. So you wouldn't find them here from a search, but you would from a perspective of searching them on Google that way. All right. Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your summer for those of you still on summer break, and a wonderful start to your school year with whatever your role is. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever you're located, and hope you have a wonderful start to your school year. And we'll look forward to joining you in the future on a future webinar. So have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, or if it's the middle of the night for you, hope you can get some sleep. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to seeing you sometime in the future. Take care.